the Radio Forest Podcast.
It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Hey, any chance you're going to end up in that at that Ozzy performance this summer with your connection through Tony Iommi?
Well, no, because I'm somewhere else. I already thought I was about to send Tony an email and say, "Oh yeah, I hear you got a gig, and maybe I can get to come along." But I'm away. I'm on some tour somewhere in Europe that time. But anyway, it's going to be a very long and loud heavy metal day, and I'm not very good at loud music.
Yeah, I heard this
Indeed,
week.
I saw the second last concert by Black Sabbath 3 or 4 years ago, and I'd never actually seen Black Sabbath play at all, so it was very interesting to see. But boy, was it loud! And I'm not a fan of really loud music. I like to live in a. I'm an acoustic. I play the flute and the acoustic guitar and
Yeah.
these noisy drummers and guitar players. It's all right in small doses.
But on Rock and Roll Circus, was that the first time you and Tony had met or at least been on stage together?
Well, we actually the band that was then called Earth and changed their name to be Black Sabbath a little later. They appeared with Jethro Tull at a gig sometime in maybe October, November of 1968. And I was quite struck by Tony's guitar playing, his style of playing, and it was very refreshing to hear somebody with harmonically very simple ideas, but playing with a great facility and power and expertise. And so he came down to London to visit for 2 or 3 days, and we played a bit in rehearsal room. But I don't think it was going to work out as being a permanent replacement for our initial guitarist, Mick Abrahams. And indeed, Tony says that it was a very illustrative time for him to work for a couple of days because he learned some things about music and arranging and turning up on time for rehearsal, which weren't perhaps things that were typical of the pre-Black Sabbath band. But Tony's we have regularly over the years we've been in touch, and we keep exchanging those kind of emails that say, "Hey, we must get together again and have lunch," and then of course we never do.
Yeah. I saw that Spinal Tap 2 is coming out in September, and you've got quite a connection, at least to the lore of Spinal Tap. Can you touch on that real quick? Everything from the name Derek Smalls to, of course, Stonehenge. You've got, quite a few connections to that film.
Well, there are a lot of things in that movie that were taken. There are little pastiches from, I suppose, little amusing moments and anecdotes from many different bands of the era. And there are certainly a couple of things that crept in that had to be Jethro Tull. I mean, the Peterson pipes and smoked by Derek Smalls, and the because three members of Jethro Tull smoked Peterson pipes
Yeah.
quite conspicuously at that time, and also even the name Derek Smalls was the name of the projectionist on the Passion Play album, and it gets a mention also on Thick as a Brick. So, how would you come up with the name Derek Small? Well, we call him Derek Smalls. It was Derek Smalls plural when Harry Shearer's creation of the character came about. But when I challenged Harry Shearer with that on a sort of talk show thing we once did in Los Angeles, he claimed never to have heard "Thick as a Brick," and I said, "Oh well, look, I've actually brought you a copy of it here. You can see on the album cover it says Derek Smalls. It's the name of your character." He said, "Oh well, perhaps I did have a copy, but I never read it." He said it was a bit like Bill Clinton saying, that he'd it was a one of those moments where he had, like I smoked a cigar, but I didn't inhale. And
Yeah, yeah.
Harry said, "Oh yeah, I had a copy, but I didn't read it or listen to it." Anyway, but yeah, the whole thing was quite a lot of fun, and it's great to see that they might be. I mean, so far I believe it's being touted about as if it's a done deal, but I'm not sure they've actually started filming yet, and it's a pretty tall order so many years down the line for those guys to put on the tight trousers and do it all again. But we all hope in our hearts and souls that we're going to be as uplifted as we all were when Spinal Tap first came about.
Yeah, I saw McCartney and maybe Elton John might have cameos in the film. But you mentioned being on tour this summer when we talked about that Sabbath show. I imagine it's got to be somewhat difficult to get in shape for what you do. You've got a wind instrument, you're playing guitar, you're singing, you're also the front man. So a guitarist sort of stands, and this kind of made me think of like pop stars that have the headsets. They're dancing and then they're out of breath. So they said singing is one thing, moving and singing is a whole nother thing. So you've got quite the full plate when you're on stage. Do you just show up and be Ian Anderson ready, or is there some sort of preparedness that you're working on now?
Yes, it's called sound check because I've always, since I've can remember, I've always thought sound check is an important thing to do. I know a lot of bands who don't do their own sound checks. Their road crew do it, and they just waltz on stage. They arrive half an hour before the concert and walk out there and do it. And I mean, I personally know some acts who work that way. But for us, it's an absolute ritual every day to be there, and we set aside an hour for sound check, during which time there's an opportunity to play 4 or 5 songs for the benefit of the sound engineer and the lighting guy and everybody to get everything fine-tuned and correct. But for me, particularly, it's a warm-up exercise. It's a preparing in terms of not just the physicality of it, but the mental focus. It's just getting everything honed, ready for action. And I don't like there to be too long a gap between sound check and showtime. For me, anything more than 2 hours is a mistake. The guys, they like to kind of hang out and have a relaxed period of time after sound check before we start the show. But for me, my energy level will dip after an hour or two, and so I like to get on with it. But it is 2 hours of aerobics on stage, and that's the best form of workout for me, is to do regular but not too daunting short tours. So I go away for 2 or 3 days at a time, come home, sleep in my own bed for 3 nights, and head off again. So it's rather like going to the gym 3 days a week, but I don't have to pay a subscription fee. I get paid for turning up.
Now, Curious Ruminant is out now, and you've had albums released also in 2022 and 2023. What's with the sudden step up in new music? I mean, have you just been that busy? Have you had all these ideas you've been working on?
Uh, well, in the case of Curious Ruminant, it began actually during May of last year when my son found an old demo on a laptop computer. He was going to trash and smash up the hard disk and found some audio files, and he sent me one and said, "Is this something I should keep?" And I said, "Well, send it to me." And I played it and thought, "Wow, this is too good to waste. Something that I think our fans would like to hear." And so it was just an instrumental piece with keyboards and flute, but I decided to turn it into a finished song. So I started off by writing lyrics and a melody and adding bass and drums and guitars and cajon. And it was the first track that I finished in that sequence of songwriting, which was over a period of about 6 weeks. So it all just kind of came into place in a relatively quick period of time, and then I moved on into the final overdubs and the mixing and the mastering and doing all the artwork, and so it was all finished up by the beginning of August.
Well, Curious Ruminant is out now. It's Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. Ian, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, man.
Greg, great to talk to you too. Take care, and look forward to seeing you in person one day.